Huge round of applause for Jonah Adams.
Hello. Thank you. 100 years ago, my ancestors fled Game of Thrones levels of violence and political upheaval in Eastern Europe and braved the treacherous journey to America. They left their shtetls and families behind so that their descendants could be free and safe. I yearned growing up to understand what my ancestors had gone through. So when I was accepted to spend a year fostering Jewish youth leadership in the former Soviet Union, I was so excited to be my family's triumphant return to the old country. But I was based in Estonia, a first world country where computer programming is a mandatory class starting in 3rd grade. There, I often felt like the one from a primitive land, and the H&M and 3 sushi places on my block were not helping me get in touch with my ancestors. Plus, I had thought America would be highly regarded in Europe's young democracies, but much of Estonia and most of its Jews are Russians who identify with Russia and its shirtless leader, even though they live in the free EU. So I was enjoying learning Russian and getting to know the Jewish community of Estonia, but this was not the old country that I had been looking for. 4 months in, I accompanied a group of locals to a Jewish conference in Ukraine, the land of my ancestors. We picked up some more Jews in Latvia and Lithuania on the way, but when we crossed the EU border, I knew this was the place. The endless pine forests, the massive potholes in the road, the Bond villain border guards, the amazing exchange rate. This was the old country I had been looking for. But the conference was at a Carpathian ski resort, not exactly Anatevka. Now, I'm a geography nerd. I make it my business to know what's going on in the world. So I knew that Ukraine had been slow to embrace Western values like democracy and transparency, but a new deal was about to pass that would bring Ukraine closer to the EU, and everyone was cautiously optimistic about Ukraine's future. I was getting to know the other conference attendees from Ukraine and Russia, from the Baltics like us, from Germany and Israel, even Crimea, when we heard the news. Viktor Yanukovych, the ethnic Russian president of Ukraine, famed for his rampant corruption, betrayed his country, abandoning the EU and its transparency for the corruption of Vladimir Putin in Europe's Game of Thrones. We continued with our conference, lectures, skiing, trivia night, a costume party, all while keeping an eye on the TV as protesters massed in the capital's main square. They called it Euromaidan. 600 kilometers from Kiev, we hoped we could stay out of the fray and even ventured to the city of Chernovitz for a Jewish tour. But there we watched from a cafe window as the protest there grew and grew. That night, a parade of vehicles came honking past the resort, yelling in Ukrainian and waving EU and Ukrainian flags. They called it an Automaidan. The next day, all hell broke loose. The police, all Yanukovych's ethnic Russian cronies, came down on the protesters as his iron fist. The protesters, ethnic Ukrainians and Russians alike in their desire for freedom, stood fast in their barricades with the support of their neighbors. We knew we had to get out immediately. But automaidans had been declared illegal and checkpoints were set up across the country. Suddenly our EU license plate wasn't looking so good. Much worse, Poland, fearing hordes of Ukrainians fleeing the conflict, completely shut their border. So we made a mad dash for Slovakia, hoping their border would still be open by the time we got there. In any conflict, you fear the other side. But in this conflict, we had no side. As EU citizens, we were the enemy of the police who were now taking orders from Putin. As ethnic Russians, we were the enemy of the ethnic Ukrainians in a province that's 98% Ukrainian. And as Jews, we're everyone's enemy. Because whenever there's chaos, the Jews lose. We fled across the Carpathian Mountains, admiring the snow-covered landscapes and brightly colored churches, reading billboards for vodka plastered in political graffiti. On your left, you could look into the eyes of impoverished peasants, while on your right were empty summer mansions belonging to political cronies. On our way, we were stopped again and again, each time having first to decipher which parts of our identity we needed to hide. We didn't know if this was a violent end for Ukraine or a rebirth, but we knew we'd be better off elsewhere. I finally understood how my ancestors had felt. After 3 hours at the border, we finally made it into Slovakia. I'm pretty sure this is the happiest that anyone has ever been to be in Slovakia. Until that day, everyone on that bus had taken the freedoms of the West for granted. But to celebrate having made it to safety, our first stop in the EU was for a late dinner at McDonald's. Thank you.